My name is Alina Ware. Have you ever loved someone so much that you ignored the warning signs? Have you ever convinced yourself that the person who held your heart could never be the one to break it? I used to believe that love was enough, that if I gave my all, if I trusted completely, if I proved my loyalty, I would be safe. But love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're losing yourself. It's not supposed to make you question your own reality. I thought I had found something rare, someone who saw me for who I truly was, someone who accepted me despite everything, but I was wrong, so wrong. Because love doesn't make you feel guilty for saying no. Love doesn't push past your boundaries. Love doesn't make excuses for pain. Love doesn't laugh when you cry. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me, I didn't even realize what had happened until it was too late. Before I continue, I want to warn you, this story contains sensitive topics, including emotional manipulation and abuse. If these topics are triggering for you, please take care of yourself while watching. Viewer discretion is advised. When I met Tadeo Clark, he was everything I thought I wanted. He had a presence that could light up a room, a voice that carried warmth, and words that felt like poetry. He was charming in a way that made you feel special, like you were the only person in the world who truly mattered. Unlike other men I had known, he didn't judge me. He didn't make me feel ashamed of my past. He told me that my worth wasn't tied to my experiences, that he loved me for who I was, not for what I had done or hadn't done. And I believed him. Because when you've spent your whole life guarding your heart, fearing rejection, and worrying about how others will see you, finding someone who accepts you completely feels like a miracle. It feels like safety. It feels like home. I remember the way he looked at me, his eyes filled with admiration, his voice soft and reassuring. He would tell me that I was different, that I was special, that I wasn't like anyone else he had ever met, and I wanted to believe that so badly. I thought I had found something rare, something real. But looking back, I see now that the cracks were there from the start. At first, he was gentle. He never pushed too hard, never crossed any lines. He listened to me when I spoke about my beliefs and my boundaries. He told me he admired my values, that he respected them. But slowly, little by little, things began to change. It started with the small things, the way his hands would linger a little longer than they should, the way he would pull me closer even when I hesitated, the way he would kiss me, even when I wasn't sure if I wanted to. And when I pulled away, he would laugh, shake his head, and say things like, "Come on, it's just love, don't you want to make me happy?" At first, it seemed harmless. I told myself that this was normal, that this was how relationships worked. I thought maybe I was just being too rigid, too cautious, too afraid to open my heart completely. I ignored the discomfort, the feeling deep inside me that told me something wasn't right, the little voice in my head that whispered, "This isn't what love is supposed to feel like." Because love is supposed to be kind, love is supposed to respect boundaries, love is supposed to make you feel safe. But I convinced myself that love also required compromise, that maybe I was overthinking it, that maybe this was just what it meant to be in a relationship. And so, I let it happen. Because when you love someone, you want to believe the best in them. You want to trust that their intentions are pure. You want to believe that they would never do anything to hurt you. But sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us in ways we never saw coming. At first, I told myself it was just his way of showing love, that his desire for me was a reflection of how much he cared. He would look at me with such intensity, such passion, that for a while, I mistook it for devotion. But something didn't feel right. Our intimacy grew faster than I was ready for. The first time it happened, I told myself it was fine, it was just a moment of weakness, a slip, nothing more. I thought that if I could just regain control, if I could just remind him of my boundaries, he would respect them. But every time I tried to pull back, he found a way to make me feel guilty. He would sigh, shake his head, and say, Why are you acting like this? Don't you trust me? A woman who truly loves her man would do anything for him. I love you so much, I can't control myself around you. And I wanted to believe that was true, that his desire was proof of his love, that his persistence meant I was special, that I was wanted. So I let it happen. Even when something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't okay, even when my body tensed at his touch, when my mind screamed for space, I told myself that love required sacrifice. That this was what relationships were supposed to be like. That maybe I was the one who needed to change. It wasn't just the words he used, it was the way he made me feel, like I was disappointing him, like I was hurting him by saying no. He would pull away, his face filled with sadness, and say, "Do you even love me, or am I the only one who feels this way?" And those words, they cut deep. Because I did love him, at least, I thought I did. So I started questioning myself. Was I being too distant? Was I expecting too much? Was I pushing him away? I had always been careful about intimacy, I had always been firm about my beliefs, but today made me wonder if I was holding on too tightly, if I was making things harder than they needed to be. And so, little by little, I stopped resisting. It wasn't all at once, it was a slow unraveling, a gradual breaking down of the walls I had built around myself. One small compromise after another, one step further each time. Until one day, I looked back and realized I had crossed lines I swore I never would. I remember the night it all changed, the night I felt something shift inside me. We were at his apartment again, the same place where I had told myself over and over that I would be strong, that I would set my boundaries, that I would leave if things went too far. But he was different that night. He wasn't asking, he wasn't waiting for my permission. He was expecting. And when I hesitated, when I tried to remind him of what I was comfortable with, he just smiled and said, "Baby, it's too late to stop now, you've already given me so much, what's the difference now?" And I didn't have an answer. Because in his eyes, there was no difference. What was one more step? What was one more boundary? What was one more time I let myself be convinced? And so I stayed silent. Because at that moment, I realized something that terrified me more than anything else. I wasn't the one in control anymore. He was. That was the first time I felt it. Not just discomfort, not just guilt. Fear. Fear of losing him, fear of what he might do if I said no, fear that I had already let things go too far to take any of it back. I told myself it was still love. I told myself that love is complicated, that love is messy, that love is full of hard choices. But deep down, I knew. Love isn't supposed to feel like this. Love isn't supposed to make you afraid. February 8th, a day I will never forget. I remember waking up that morning thinking it was just another ordinary day. There was nothing unusual, nothing that signaled what was coming. I had no idea that by the time the day was over, I would never feel the same again. Tadeo had invited me over to his apartment. We had spent time there before, just watching movies, talking, being close, but something about that day felt different from the moment I arrived. There was an urgency in his voice, a tension in the air I couldn't quite place. He was more insistent, more persuasive than usual. His hands lingered longer than before, his words softer, laced with something I couldn't name yet. At first, I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, something inside me was uneasy. And then, he brought it up again. Anal sex. The same request I had refused more times than I could count, the same thing I had told him was a hard no every time he mentioned it. I told him no again, just like I had before, just like I had 100 times before. But this time, he didn't back down. "If you trust me, you'll try it just once," he said. "It won't even hurt, I promise, just the tip." I shook my head. "No, Today no means no. But his voice was so soft, so convincing. His hands traced circles on my skin, his lips close to my ear. You know how much I love you, right? You know how much I want you. I tensed. I knew what he was doing. I knew this pattern too well by now. The way he made it seem like love, the way he made me feel like denying him was the same as denying us. I was tired, so tired of explaining, tired of arguing, tired of feeling like the bad person for wanting my boundaries to be respected. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed no, but that voice, the one that had been beaten down by months of guilt, of manipulation, of doubt, whispered something else. Maybe this was just another compromise. Maybe this was what relationships were about. Maybe I was being too rigid, too unyielding. Maybe if I just gave in, he would finally stop asking. So, against my instincts, I said okay, but only the tip. He smiled, he kissed me, told me I was perfect. And I thought, stupidly, naively, that I had taken control of the situation, that by setting limits, I was keeping myself safe. I didn't know then that this was the moment I lost all control. The moment I turned away, his grip changed. It wasn't gentle anymore, it wasn't loving. His hands locked around my hips, firm, unrelenting. And then, pain. A pain so sharp, so unbearable, I gasped out loud. My body stiffened, my hands clawing at the sheets. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. It was happening too fast, too fast, too fast. I told him to stop. My voice was shaky, desperate. I tried to push against him, but he wouldn't move. Tadeo, please stop, I begged. Relax, babe, he said. It'll be over soon. Over soon, over soon, over soon. The words felt distant, like they belonged in another world, a world where this wasn't happening to me, a world where I could still believe he loved me. I wasn't just scared, I felt powerless. My voice didn't matter, my body didn't belong to me anymore. I fought, I tried to pull away, but his hands held me down, stronger than I ever thought they could be. He wasn't listening, he didn't care. And then I started crying. I don't know if it was the sound of my sobs, the way my body shook beneath him, the realization that I was breaking. But that was the only thing that made him stop. The weight lifted, his hands let go, he pulled away. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, nothing but the sound of my own breathing, ragged and uneven, and then he spoke. I'm sorry, babe, I got carried away. Carried away, as if this was an accident, a mistake, as if my pain, my fear, my tears, were just a side effect of something he couldn't help. I didn't say anything, I couldn't. I just laid there, frozen, feeling like I had left my body, feeling like I wasn't even real anymore. I don't remember leaving his apartment, I don't remember how I got home. I just remember sitting in my bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My body was shaking, my mind was numb. I looked the same on the outside, but I wasn't the same inside. There was blood, there was pain, a raw, burning pain that made it impossible to sit, to move, to even breathe without feeling it. But worse than the physical pain was the voice in my head, the one that whispered over and over again. You agreed, didn't you? This is your fault, isn't it? You should have known better. I told myself that if I hadn't agreed at all, this wouldn't have happened, that I had given him an inch and he had taken everything, and that somehow, that meant it was my mistake. I had never felt so alone before, never felt so broken. But I stayed silent. Because if I said the words out loud, if I admitted what had really happened, that would mean admitting that it wasn't just a bad moment. It was something else, something darker, something I wasn't ready to face yet. The days after that night felt like a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, barely present, barely existing. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his hands on me. Every time I tried to sit still, I heard his voice telling me to relax, that it would be over soon. But it wasn't over, it was never over. The pain lingered, sharp, deep, a constant reminder of what had happened, but worse than the physical pain was the shame, the self-doubt, the endless loop of questions spinning through my head. Had I let this happen? Was it my fault for agreeing at all? Could I have stopped it? I wanted to believe it was a bad night, a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe that if I just pushed it down far enough, if I buried it deep inside me, it would eventually disappear. And then, 1 week later, he called me. I don't know why I answered, maybe because I wanted to hear him apologize, maybe because a part of me still needed to believe that he cared, maybe because I thought, stupidly, that if I just acted normal, everything would go back to how it was before. But when I picked up, he wasn't sad, he wasn't apologetic. He was cheerful, as if nothing had happened, as if the last time we were together hadn't broken me in a way I couldn't put into words. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice light, playful, like we were just catching up after a normal week, like I hadn't spent every night since then staring at my ceiling, reliving the worst moment of my life. I barely responded. I could feel my chest tightening, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Then, in the same easy, laughing tone, he said something that made my blood turn cold. "You know I lied, right?" I gripped the phone tighter, suddenly unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything but listen as he kept talking like it was some kind of joke. "It wasn't just the tip, babe. I went all the way and I made sure you wouldn't feel my balls so you wouldn't notice." My whole body locked up, my stomach dropped so fast it felt like I was free falling, my heart slammed against my ribs, and for a second, the world around me disappeared. Everything in me shattered at once. I froze, my skin felt cold, my hands numb. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven, like I had been running. I couldn't speak, I couldn't think, I couldn't understand what I had just heard. He was lying, he had to be lying, right? I tried to find words, but all that came out was a whisper, a single, broken sentence that barely felt like my own voice. "That was rape." And then, he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an "I'm sorry" laugh, not a "I didn't mean it" laugh. A real laugh, a deep, amused, entertained laugh. "It's not rape, babe," he said. "You agreed I didn't tie you down." There it was, the truth staring me right in the face. The man who told me he loved me, the man who made me believe I was special, the man who held me in his arms, who whispered that I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He didn't care. He never cared. It was never love, it was never about love, it was about power, it was about control, it was about taking what he wanted, consequences be damned. I had spent days, weeks, blaming myself for what happened, wondering if I had let it happen, if I had done something to cause it. But in that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't overthinking it, I wasn't being dramatic, I wasn't misunderstanding what had happened. He had violated me, he had known exactly what he was doing, he had planned it, he had tricked me, he had laughed about it. And now, he was telling me to my face that it didn't matter. I felt something crack inside me, something deep, something I had been holding together with frayed edges and forced denial. I hung up the phone. I didn't say anything, I didn't scream at him, I didn't argue, I didn't beg for an explanation. Because what else was there to say? The truth was out, the mask was off, there was nothing left to pretend. And for the first time since that night, I let myself cry. Not the silent, hidden kind of crying I had been doing before, not the quiet, shameful sobs muffled into my pillow at night. I broke. Because I finally understood. This was never love. And this was never my fault. The days blurred together, I barely ate, I barely moved. It felt like my body existed, but I wasn't inside anymore, I was just there. I had stopped checking my phone. Tadeo had called, messaged, even left voicemails, but I couldn't bear to hear his voice, not after what he said, not after I finally understood the truth. I wasn't angry, not yet, I was just empty. I would sit in silence for hours, staring at the walls, trying to remember who I was before all of this, before I met him, before I let him in, before he rewrote the way I saw myself. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find her, the girl I used to be. She felt like a stranger now, a shadow I could never reach. And then, a knock at my door. It was so unexpected, so sharp in the quiet that I flinched. My heart pounded against my ribs. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one came to see me, no one checked in on me. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the door, frozen in place. A part of me was scared, irrationally terrified that it was him, that he had come to find me, that he wouldn't let me go that easily. The knock came again, a little softer this time, but still firm, still demanding an answer. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, my hands trembling as I reached for the doorknob. Slowly, hesitantly, I opened the door, and standing there, on the other side, was Raina Harding. A girl I barely knew. I knew her face. We had mutual friends, we had seen each other in passing, exchanged polite smiles, but we had never really spoken, never had a reason to. So why was she here? She looked nervous, shifting slightly on her feet, but her eyes, there was something in them, something I recognized instantly. Something I had seen in the mirror. Pain. She took a deep breath, like she was gathering the courage to say what she came to say. "We need to talk," she said, "about Tadeo." My stomach twisted into knots. I gripped the edge of the doorframe, suddenly unsteady. How did she know? I opened my mouth to say something, to ask her what she meant, but before I could, she spoke again. "I know what he did to you." The air in my lungs vanished just like that. My heart stopped, my hands went numb. Because hearing those words, hearing someone else say them out loud, it was like breaking through the surface of the water after nearly drowning, gasping for air, realizing that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't alone. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand what she meant, what she was saying. And then, she said the words that changed everything. Because he did it to me too. It was like the world tilted beneath my feet. I had spent days questioning myself, doubting my own memories, wondering if maybe I was blowing things out of proportion, if maybe I was just being dramatic, if maybe, somehow, I had let this happen to myself. But now, here she was, another girl standing in front of me with the same haunted eyes, the same hesitation in her voice. Raina stepped inside. She told me everything. She told me how she met him, how charming he was in the beginning, how easy it was to fall for him, how he made her feel special, chosen, safe. And then, how it all changed. The little manipulations, the guilt, the slow erosion of her boundaries, the way he always pushed just a little further, a little harder, until one day, she woke up and realized she had nothing left to give. She told me about her breaking point, the moment she knew she had to get away, the moment she knew, without a doubt, that he never loved her. And now, she was standing in front of me telling me that she saw the same thing happening to me, that she recognized the way I disappeared, that she had been watching, waiting, hoping that she was wrong. But she wasn't. Because here I was, just like she had been once before. When she was done speaking, there was a long silence. I sat there, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. But this time, it was different. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone, I didn't feel crazy, I didn't feel like this was something I had to carry by myself. I looked at my phone. It was sitting on the table, screen dark. But I knew his name was in there. I knew I still had choices to make: block him, expose him, stay silent. I hovered over his name, my fingers trembled, but for the first time, it wasn't fear holding me back. It was something else, something stronger. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I had lost. Hope. I know I'm not the only one who has ever felt trapped, who has ever questioned their own reality, who has ever wondered if they were to blame for someone else's choices. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love should never make you feel powerless. Love should never make you afraid. Love should never take away your voice. So now, I want to ask you. Have you ever ignored the warning signs? Have you ever doubted yourself because of someone else's words? If you have, you're not alone, and maybe it's time to take back your power too.